Well, hello there. Welcome again to the Don McKeag Show. We've been doing this show now for probably 5 or 6 years between Plymouth and Carver, and for the many different towns that we are able to connect with. I am so glad to be here because I feel like a lone wolf oftentimes in terms of the message I have. Those that have never seen this show. By the way, those who have, if you want to go on YouTube, there are over 40 shows of my opinion, shall we say, on just about everything. But my deep concern at my stage in life for where this country is going and where it has been, and having lived post-World War II and seeing the difference in our attitudes has alarmed me for many years. I have been an educator. I've been a teacher of English for over 12 years. I coached football and baseball. I missed it when I left to go into the restaurant business. I have done a radio show and continue on Saturdays from 11 to 1 on Cape Cod. This will be 25 years that I have been on radio. I used to be on every morning, the morning show. Now I just do Saturdays. I say this primarily to qualify what I have to say and the experience I have and my utter dismay at the imbalance of the reporting today nationwide and on even small stations like this. I am a conservative. I am a former JFK Democrat when the Democratic Party was a totally different party. I am a non-political supporter now because I believe that our present president has been the first in my lifetime, the first to ever call it what it is. It is a swamp in Washington, and I will give you information over the past that has been quoted but is not quoted enough. I don't care if it's this station, if you look at the sides of the two issues, liberalism versus conservatism, and you will see a huge discrepancy. 25 years of a number one show on Cape Cod, I have never been asked to appear or even substitute on a PBS station or an NPR station. You watch your television stations. You watch 60 Minutes and watch who they support and who they have on. They do not have anywhere near a fair and balanced reporting to you and your children and grandchildren. I become very discouraged when I see this, but I keep doing my little lone wolf approach. Today I'm going to try to read certain things to you and also tell you certain things that I believe are true. They're true to human beings in general. We have a culture today, a media today, that wants to eliminate religion. Oh, they'll cover themselves, but deep down, they do not. These are people at the top. These are people who are socialists and don't even know that socialism always has a minimization, if not outright avoidance of religion. Joseph Stalin in Russia took care of all the churches, got rid of them. Hitler, others. They do not want the human being to have a belief in something more than the government. That is, in my humble opinion, where the Democratic Party has gone. The leadership, not the people who are Democrats. Wonderful people still, but they are absolutely misinformed now, and they are blind loyalists. So I speak as a former very strong Democrat, not as a Republican. One of the things I always try to talk about, because I believe that we are in a need for better education than we're getting. I believe that education is a swamp, just as Washington and politics is. I believe that we have legislative, we have executive, and we have judicial. That's the three brilliant branches our founding fathers formed in making this the greatest country there has ever been on the face of the earth. And we still are, despite what's going on, despite those who would undermine us without even knowing it, despite the fact that now education demeans the President of the United States. Lack of respect for so many areas. The court system, again, a swamp. You look at where we are today, and of those that are old enough to remember the differences back in the 60s and 50s, there was upheaval, yes, but we had a president, John F. Kennedy, young and ambitious to bring this country to a new level. Don't ask what your country's going to do for you. What are you going to do for your country? That's not socialism. The Democratic Party now says, whatever you need, we'll give you, and you just have to vote for us. You can deny it, but it's there. Now, going back to 1524, as I said, I always use a reference to Martin Luther. You know, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. We are doing what Rome did, what Egypt did, what other great, successful cultures did. They self-destructed. Abraham Lincoln once said, "No foreign country will ever conquer the United States. If we lose our liberties and our rights, it will be because we failed. We took those rights away." That's what we're doing now. We're dividing. There's a reason. I wonder how many of our young students and their teachers explain to them what united we stand, divided we fall. Right now, we're in the division place. We're now encouraging an elected president to be demeaned, to be threatened. This is not about whether you like Donald Trump or any president. It's called respect. We demean our police officers. We allow this media to make it look like every time a black person or anyone is shot by a cop, it's the cop's fault first. Never have I heard one reporter, never have I seen one report where the network, CNN, Channel 5, went to the home of the police officer who has just had to shoot someone and seen what he's feeling or what his wife is feeling. This presumption that those in authority don't have feelings. I've known people. I'm old enough to know. I've seen soldiers come back. I've known those who've lost legs, lost their eyesight. And yet we have a media that is so quick to take the side of the ne'er-do-well, the non-participant. Now they're after Donald Trump on yet another situation, avoiding the draft. And they'll make it a big deal, avoiding serving his country. William Jefferson Clinton not only avoided the draft, but he went out of the country to avoid Vietnam. No story there. No comparisons there. Look at what they're doing with this Russian collusion. They know that the Clintons have made millions off of the Russians. They know that they parted with our uranium deposits. They've had to cover it, but it dies because the mainstream media will not report it. But let Donald Trump or any president that isn't a Democrat, that isn't in the tank, let him leave the toilet seat up and it's a story. And if it wasn't so sad, it would be really humorous. But getting back to what I was going to mention, so we go back historically to Martin Luther. Now here's another reason I'm down on education, terribly down on education, and I'll go further and take it right personal and right with the town of Carver. They have allowed, again, this liberal establishment who is absolutely, to me, out of their minds now. The leadership, again, many innocent people have followed all sorts of causes, not knowing where it was taking them. That's what we have now with our young people. And they've been encouraged to do that by colleges, no less, by professors. Well, a man named Martin Luther, I guarantee, I'll bet 80% of the young people don't know who Martin Luther is, and they'll think it was Martin Luther King, for whom he was named. Martin Luther King Jr.'s father was a minister, admired Martin Luther, who formed, basically, he took on the Catholic Church hierarchy. It was corrupt, just like our government is today. Make no bones about it. All those people who voted for Trump, now think of how flawed Mr. Trump was during the campaign. I cringed. You think, well, those of us that are conservatives didn't cringe and don't cringe sometimes in some of the things he says or does? How did he win? I'll tell you how he won, because he is the first person to give all of us an option from the status quo that has been proven. The Republicans have promised to do certain things. They've been reelected and done nothing. They are all, again, a little social group. Remember, 556, that includes the Supreme Court, only 556 people in this wonderful country make the laws and the rules for over 330 million. There are only 100 senators. They're the most powerful branch in the United States. Only 100. And take a look at who we got representing us. Take a look at the example of people that we've voted for years. Well, Martin Luther, who took on by himself. Now the comparison is ludicrous, but I'm saying I believe Donald Trump to a degree is our Martin Luther. This government has been so corrupted that someone had to step forward, and that's how he got in, because the public is fed up. I laugh. They talk about, for years, they've talked about the polling, the approval rates of the president. They never talk about the fact for years that Congress has had the lowest approval rates of anything. 24%, 27, 22. They're making our rules. They're flying all over the country, spending millions. The Obamas spent more money than any 5 presidents put together. Okay, though, can't say anything about President Obama, because that would mean you were a racist. How can 13% of the population, which is the black population, how can a person that's black be elected in a racist country? Explain that to me, liberals. Somebody had to vote for him. Twice. It's never good enough. Never good enough. Well, Martin Luther said in 1524, and I keep repeating this on my radio as well as this show, because it has to be at least heard. Whether we do anything about it, I can't control that. Cowardice asks the question, is it safe? That's what we got. We get cowards out there. Oh, I don't want to get involved. I don't want to get involved. Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Oh, am I going to get along all right? You know, am I going to get what I want? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? That's the worst one. Oh, I want to be with the winner. I want to be with somebody that's going to be loved. But conscience asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time, this is for all of us, when a person must decide whether or not to take a position that's popular, that's safe, that's politic, or whether we want to take a position that we can go to bed and sleep and know our conscience told us it was right. I'm an Irish Catholic, first-generation immigrant. My relatives, mostly, I almost entirely voted Democrat. I'm proud that I voted Republican several times, Ronald Reagan being one and others. Those of you out there that are Irish or Italian or Catholic and you have to vote Democrat, that's a disgrace and a dishonor to this whole country. You should vote for the person you feel will do the best job. But when you say that, of course, now they like to call it disloyalty. Well, here's some of the quotes that I don't believe schools are going over. I mentioned the 7 deadly sins. When I taught English, it was 30 plus years ago, I always made time in the classroom at certain times. There used to be a Washington's birthday. That's another disgrace that liberals have done. Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, yet we don't have Abraham Lincoln's birthday that we used to. George Washington, throughout Europe, was regarded as the greatest man in the world for what he accomplished, even by King George II, I think, or the third, from England that he defeated. No, they've lopped all of the other presidents together, but we can have a Martin Luther King Day. See how racist I am? Proud of it. If that's racism, Martin Luther King Jr. was a great man and deserves to have a day. But my God, when you don't have Abraham Lincoln, who gave his life to free the slaves, took on all those Democrats who ran the southern states. By the way, I wonder if this is ever taught in the classroom. John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who was killed, had he not, I believe the Civil Rights Bill would have not passed. But there was so much emotion that it passed. But guess who was against the Civil Rights Bill? The black population doesn't know this. Democrats. The South was controlled by Democratic politicians. Senators, congressmen, mayors. You don't get that in the media. Mark Twain once said, those who don't read the newspaper are uninformed. Those who do read the newspaper are misinformed. And it was regarded as humorous because, of course, he was a humorist. Now, I'm sure today's wacky liberal control of our value system is in the process, if they haven't already. Haven't been an English teacher, I haven't researched it, but whether or not they are going to eliminate Mark Twain from the classroom. Because, of course, he wrote books that had a black young man along with Tom Sawyer, his friend, and they'll twist that into a racial problem. How about one of the greatest, if not the greatest movie ever made, Gone with the Wind, about the Civil War, showing black slaves working in the fields and a black maid at Tara. That's offensive, right? Happens to be true, happens to be fact. The Irish came over here and were slaves for quite some time. They were called indentured servants. They were sent over from England, and they were treated like dogs. They lived in the bottoms of those big buildings in Boston. They built the roads in Boston. No one denies the evils of slavery. But this vicious media today and the vicious thinking of so many of our young people, because they have been injected with this incorrect imbalance of the facts. There have been others. The Jewish population came to this country. They were treated terribly. The Chinese, terribly. It's all over money, all over prestige. So I wonder if the classroom, some days I keep thinking I'd like to offer a class, see if 2 or 3 kids would show up. What do you think, Dylan? Will you sign up, even if it's free? No, he says no. Here are famous people's quotes. Again, I doubt very much if they're introduced into the classroom. In my many years, I have come to a conclusion that 1 useless man is a shame, 2 is a law firm, and 3 or more is a Congress. John Adams. That's how highly he thought of even the government as it began. Suppose you were an idiot, and suppose you were a member of Congress, but then again, I repeat myself, Mark Twain, 1884. I contend that for a nation to try to tax itself into prosperity is like a man standing in a bucket and trying to lift himself up by the hands. Winston Churchill. A government which robs Peter to pay Paul can always depend on the support of Paul. George Bernard Shaw. A liberal is someone who feels a great debt to his fellow man, which debt he proposes to pay off with your money. That's what it is. Democracy must be something more than 2 wolves and a sheep voting on what to have for dinner. Foreign aid must be defined as a transfer of money from poor people in rich countries to rich people in poor countries. Douglas Casey, a classmate of Bill Clinton at Georgetown University. Now, does anybody with a half a brain not wonder why not one of those groups of Congress, members of Congress we vote for, Mr. Keating and Ms. Warren, the State Department, why do we have retired people in this country threatened with the end of Social Security? The Democrats do this every time, every election. It's always going to be the Republicans that are going to eliminate Social Security. But that being said, why is it that the Democrats or any other politician can threaten the retired people who no longer can work in many cases? They're living off of their Social Security, and they can threaten the loss of Social Security, the Democrats, if they vote Republican. That's what they do to people, to do anything. They will do anything to get a vote. Anything. And yet, getting back to what I was previously talking about, we continue, both parties continue to give millions and millions of dollars to countries who hate us, with never even a thought of saying, okay, Iraq, we send you $3 million a year, $30 million a year, we're going to drop it down to 10. But they can tell us, the people they represent, that we've got to be afraid. It's insanity. It's insanity. Foreign aid must be defined as a transfer of money from poor people in rich countries. Not just poor, middle class. All of you out there that are just average, as I was, made some money, we're the ones paying all of this off. These people in politics, not only, they pay taxes. We pay a lot of them. After either one or two terms, they have the best health care you can get. It's not the health care they're going to give us. They don't pay. Nobody says a word in the press. P.J. O'Rourke, who was great, he was a civil libertarian. Giving money and power to government is like giving whiskey and car keys to teenage boys. Wow. That goes back to people who love to spend other people's money. Oh, that was the Prime Minister, Maggie Thatcher in England. She said the trouble, well, she called them socialist liberals, is that eventually they run out of other people's money. Government's view of the economy could be summed up in a few short phrases. If it moves, tax it. If it keeps moving, regulate it. And if it stops moving, subsidize it. Ronald Reagan. Will Rogers, most people don't even know who he was. I don't make jokes. I just watch the government report the facts. It was even laughable in the 1920s. No man's life, liberty, or property is safe while the legislature is in session. You know, all of this stuff is just Mark Twain. The only difference between a tax man and a taxidermist, that's someone who stuffs animals, is that the taxidermist at least leaves the skin. So, Mark Twain lived from 1835 to 1910. He was only 74 years old, which then I guess was old, but today is not. I just want to continue to give. I get angry, I do, but I'm passionate. It's not anger. I love people, always have, always will. They don't have to go along with me. They don't have to like what I say. But again, I don't stop talking to someone that's a liberal because they disagree with me. But the other way around happens all the time. They get nasty. They get mad. They storm off. Very sad. Sad for them. But I want to go to what's happening in education. We all have heard. And again, it's never reported properly. They talk about our young people, many of whom you're listening are grandparents and parents that are paying for their kids to go to college. First of all, as an educator who saw it happening 30 years ago, I would say 50% of those young people in college today do not belong there academically, period. Some colleges are even eliminating Testing. Pre-admittance tests. Proven. All they want are, pardon the expression, asses in the seats. 50,000 a year. Young people leaving college in debt that don't belong there academically, aren't even happy being there. I saw this. Parents whose ego has to have their kid go to college because now, for some reason, the parents think their friends and relatives will think less of them if Nancy or Billy doesn't go to college. So they push it. We see the Ivy League right now is the real reporter that I wanted to talk about because of what George W. Bush just came out and jumped on Donald Trump yet again. Not by name, but he jumped on him, which of course the media sucks up and triples the coverage, makes George W. Bush out to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. When George W. Bush was president, he was called stupid. That's how nice they were then, too. He's really unintelligent. He's stupid. And you know what? He got stopped for drunken driving when he was in college. Of course, we don't have any Democrats that have ever been in trouble. We don't have any of the other politicians or the news people who've already been in looking at that the press corps are heavy drinkers. But now, because George Bush is criticizing this sitting president, he becomes a new and valuable authority. Now, Yale University, founded by Eli Yale, called the Elis in New Haven, Connecticut. There are over 35 members of the Bush family who have graduated from, or in a couple of cases they didn't finish, but they attended Yale. Harvard, there were at least 5 Harvard Kennedy graduates, president being one. By the way, Harvard that I criticize for a multiple of reasons, but it shows the swamp that education's been in for years and years. Harvard is the College of Presidents. It's the only school. There's been 5 presidents of the United States that went to Harvard. John Adams, John Quincy Adams, both of whom lived in Quincy. Teddy Roosevelt, his cousin Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and of course John Fitzgerald Kennedy, all of whom lived in Boston while they were going to Harvard, in Harvard Yard, but all from the elite. This is going to be my point. The only one that took on the elite was Teddy Roosevelt. The rest of them, until Donald Trump, have just been co-conspirators and kept their mouth shut. Now, just to show you where our feel-good liberals have taken us in Yale, and why you'll never get, oh, by the way, Bill Clinton, of course, went to Yale. John Kerry went to Yale. Hillary Clinton went to Yale. Yale University's totalitarian left has decided to purify a Puritan. Now, since 1929, a stone carving of a musket-carrying Puritan settler next to an Indian sits next to an Indian holding a bow and arrow. It has graced the exterior of Yale's Sterling Memorial Library. Though neither is pointing his weapon at the other, the school's ultra-left crowd claim the carving celebrates colonial brutality. Now we go back to what I just read by Martin Luther, who stood against the Pope and all the corrupt cardinals, bishops, and other priests in the 16th century. He was excommunicated and his life threatened. Now we go to this, a much smaller thing. But again, where is the courage? As Martin said, cowardice asks the question, is it safe? How many of you have called a superintendent of schools when you don't like something you've heard that's been going on there? Or you don't, how about calling the school committee when you don't like the fact that the town has built a school that's twice what it should be? No, you go to the golf course and you're my age. You don't want to say anything. Well, that's why it continues. But getting back to this brilliant, compassionate, liberal movement in this country. Now remember, this stone carving done by a famous sculptor depicting a Puritan holding his musket and the Indians having a bow and arrow. What it signified really was there was a togetherness between the Indians and the Puritans. They used their weapons mostly for hunting. Doesn't matter. When you rewrite history, nothing matters. As reported by the Yale Alumni Magazine, they now decided, the administrators, of course, they're another bunch of losers, overpaid, I might add, losers. Sorry, it's the truth. So now what the Yale administration decided, they brought some Masons in to hide the settler's gun under a layer of cement. But muzzling the musket wasn't enough for the pitchfork and torch-wielding leftists. Lacking the stones to fight this nonsense, Yale's leadership determined that leaving the depiction in place would have the unintended effect of giving it a place of honor that it does not deserve. Because the carving supposedly depicts a scene of warfare and colonial violence toward local Native American inhabitants. Once again, the Ivy League, the Yaleys, you think George Bush, either one of them, had the guts to make a call and say, wait just a minute, this has been here for almost 100 years. It depicts a historic truth. Yet Harvard, again, I repeat this on my radio show, this great university, considered the greatest in the world, about 15 or 20 years, they would not allow recruiters on the quad because the administrators and the leftists were so against our involvement in Iraq, Iran. Now, it's always convenient that it's always a Republican president when these Ivy League compassionate and kind individuals make a stand. Well, George W. Bush was president, and he finds out about it. Have any of you seen the posters, the pictures of these handsome and beautiful young men and women who are given years of their life to support this country, underpaid, willing to sacrifice life and limb, and they can't encourage other Harvard students to give some time to their country? George Bush called and threatened them with the loss of federal funding. First of all, Harvard right now has, I believe, $72 billion in endowment funds. Not one of those churches or schools, BU, BC, Harvard, all the rest of them, MIT, they get our money. to charge our kids $50,000 a year. Then let the liberals bring in the fact that there's a waiting line of foreigners that the liberals want to make sure they give them a chance. Taxpayers in Massachusetts can't get their own kids into a Massachusetts college. And you think I'm crazy? Some. Well, those that are still watching maybe don't. I've been fighting this for years, and it doesn't seem to matter because we don't have a conscience. Oh, we talk about it in the coffee shops. I might add, by the way, Harvard, however, would let any mixed-sex group hand out pamphlets. Oh, you want to challenge diversity. But our young people in dress uniform couldn't encourage fellow classmates, or I should say they didn't necessarily be classmates, students that were here from the service. John Kennedy once said, "The great enemy of the truth is very often not the lie, deliberate, continued, and dishonest, but the myth, which is persistent, persuasive, and usually unrealistic." The elitist control of our country and our educational system, and now our judicial values, has been the problem for over 100 years, and it began really after the aftermath of the Civil War. Because of this, neither party really wants to confront their college buddies or fellow millionaire billionaires. Donald Trump's the only one. You don't have to like his methods. You don't have to like him. But he is shining the light on corruption. Now, if you don't want to see the truth, if you don't want to see what's happening in this country, or if you don't think it's that serious, then continue. I went down to see the superintendent of schools in Carver a couple of weeks ago. This could be any town. First of all, they built a new school. They're building it. It was defeated twice in town meeting and by the voters. Didn't matter, and it never does. It's happened on the Cape where I was. It happened in Rockland where I was. They get the bit between their teeth, and they're going to get what they want, and the hell with what the townspeople want. That being said, the 400th anniversary of the settlement called Plymouth Plantation, 1620. There's being money spent right now on the waterfront of Plymouth in preparation for that 400th anniversary, which will be a big thing, as it should be. Carver is building a middle, elementary, whatever, school. It used to be called the Governor John Carver School. It's not going to be now. To their credit, the selectmen, which used to be a dominant opinion, voted 4-1 to keep the new school's name what it was. Not today's feel-good liberals, most of whom, by the way, are newly resident in Carver. How many of them ever looked up who John Carver was? The Governor John Carver School. The first governor ever on this continent other than down in Jamestown. The man who, leaving France with his religious group, they were called like the Lendls or something of that nature, He got the money together. He got the people together to get the Mayflower. That's how important he is singularly. He settles with the group who were decimated. He was elected the first governor. He wrote the Mayflower Compact, which is a rules for government. Worked in the fields with all the laborers, even though he was of the wealthy class. Became ill like so many. When he died, there were only 55 settlers remaining. That's why he didn't continue on as governor for quite some time, was highly regarded by all. Now, these people came over, no communication systems, no food, not enough water. Half the boatload died and were tossed into the sea. Some pregnant women losing babies, losing themselves. No cell phones, no way to get help. They came and settled this country. And here you've got Harvard upset. These lunatic leftists, and that's what I call you. You don't know your backside from your front, and unfortunately, I wouldn't care if you're adults, but when you're young people, I care very much. Now, I talked about this on my radio show a couple of weeks ago. I know that people in Carver, many people, want that school name to remain, but they're not going to say anything. Just like the Southerners. This absolute nonsense of removing Robert E. Lee or any other Southern general or Southern because of racism. It's insane. That was history of a different time. They were very, I'm not sticking up for slavery. It was horrible. But this was how people made their living. And there's a whole lot of information that someone, if they cared, could look up if they weren't so totally imprisoned by this idea of how evil the white man always was. These people were not evil people. They were leaders. They were Christian. Many of them didn't have slaves, and those that did were very kind. I don't in any way, shape, or form support slavery. I support history, though. And yet, relatives of Robert E. Lee and others, no one found that offensive to have your famous relative all of a sudden don't exist anymore. I cannot understand what it's going to take before people understand. You know, I always use the analogy. You can spend millions on a beautiful home. You can furnish it with all the best furnishings you can find. But if that foundation underneath that home and all those furnishings and the pool room and the swimming pool, if that foundation is crumbling, or if it was not built properly, the rest of the house is eventually going to disappear. Dylan, how much time have we got? 5 minutes. Oh, good. We're almost to the end. Well, I try to hide my passion to a degree, but I can't. My stage, I don't know how long I've got, but I'll tell you one thing. I know I'll meet my maker, and if all the messes I've done or the things I haven't done right, I feel comfortable that at least I've tried with facts, not with feelings. I have feelings. It drives me crazy to hear these people accuse conservatives of being unkind. Tell you, you look at the NFL. I coached. I love football. I love baseball. To make a sport, they don't even know. They don't care. And they are paying a price. 31, now it's 33% loss of viewership. Just think about this, though. Again, who's in control? The press. They don't want us to be happy. Men and women love football. They work 5-6 days a week. They work 2 jobs. They come home. I've seen this coming for a long time. They want to watch a football game. They don't want to know about the racial ramifications of this player or that player. And they don't want to have a female reporter or anybody else go down and interview the coach or the player in the middle of the game. And it's all been spewing along with 7 to 8 to 10 commercials every time a player is hurt. Pardon me. Well, I guess that's about it. Once again, Dylan, thank you very much for remaining so that you could listen to the Raving Lunatic. It's the Don McKeag Show. God bless you, and have a great week.